It is episode 3 of the xdefiant show, season reveal time, with a lot of exciting things to get through, guys. It is going to be another big episode here, as per usual. A little bit of rehashing from the last episode, no doubt, but more so the information has been expanded upon with the reveal. As of recording this, the reveal only came out less than a day ago, and it's not even live on the servers yet.
Yeah, we're sitting here waiting during maintenance, eager to jump into the servers when they go live. And as you mentioned, whereas last episode we were more so theory crafting as to what to expect, now we've seen the reveal in far more depth. This episode is going to be also talking about our reaction to it, the good, the bad, the ugly, and sort of what we're expecting as we jump into the servers. And most excitingly for me, the ranked queue as well, coming very, very soon. So there's a lot to look forward to, but it's not all sunshine and rainbows, and we'll get through those points as well.
Yeah, not entirely. I mean, we'll kind of get underway with the biggest thing, which is, of course, I want to kind of go straight into it, which is the GSK and the hilarity of the fact that you've got the Ballistic Helmet passive, meaning no one-shot headshot, which, I mean, has kind of been a Siege-related antic for quite some time now regarding that issue, and the fact that it's kind of been now brought over to xdefiant. But does it even have a place in a game like xdefiant? Because, I mean, realistically, when you kind of think about the history of these kind of arena shooters getting like headshots and one-shot headshots has been around for, you know, basically since the beginning. To have even a slight change to that is quite a big statement to make.
Yeah, this has probably been the most controversial part of this new patch. Now, every single character in the game, every faction does have its own passive. Yeah, and on this occasion, you know, GSK is being pitched by the developers as being like the strongest defensive unit in the game. Like, you're locking down a point with your shock wires, with your ADS devices. You've got the tac shield as well, which they are also theorizing will be quite a strong defensive tool. They're doubling down on that with this headshot passive, and I think in general play, this is not that impactful. Headshots generally with most weapons, it is certainly better, but you know, running around and doing some testing and stuff in the shooting range, it's not quite as impactful as you would maybe think. But when it comes to sniper gameplay and counterplay, it most certainly is. Now, I thought maybe we'd still see a world where the likes of the TAC, the most powerful sniper, would still be a one-shot headshot despite this passive, but it seems to be the case, at least how it was shown in the reveal. Every single sniper will no longer headshot against this faction, which I have mixed opinions about. I think it would be, you know, I don't know. I think it discourages good snipers who are hitting headshots, right? And, you know, back to Siege, which seems to be a natural talking point on the show. When Blackbeard first came out, the operator with the face shield, it was so powerful at launch, it was very frustrating to play against. Different style of game, but I think that the point still persists. And in fact, with the shield, with the passive in xdefiant, you don't even have to be front facing. If you get shot in the back of the head with your helmet on, you're still going to survive that shot. And I don't think that's particularly fair against snipers at all in general. And probably encourages this weird gameplay style where you're aiming more upper torso, and if you manage to hit a head, then you get punished. I'm not really a big fan of this passive. It does feel a little bit uninspired. I don't think the reasoning in the video was really all that intelligent either. It was, they literally said quote while they're wearing helmets, so it felt like a natural progression. I don't know, it just felt a little bit of a cop-out, and I think there could have been some more interesting ideas, maybe around intel or something to do with that could have, you know, lent into the R6 lore, and instead they just went, okay, let's just make them stronger against headshots. And if you're a main sniper player, I can understand your frustration. It's not going to be very fun to play against, and I wouldn't be too surprised if at some point in time it does get adjusted a little bit. I'm honestly fine with the headshot passive remaining for other weapons. I don't think it would be that, you know, huge of a buff, but certainly against snipers, I'm interested to see if the data will show that it's too powerful.
Yeah, I mean, I think that so far the community's been very receptive to feedback, like as in like the developers have been receptive to the community feedback, and I wonder if this might be another instance in which they kind of look at this. The issue that I have is this is not really the kind of thing that you can tweak. Like, it's either going to be two shots to hit to kill, or it's going to be one. There's not really much of an in between here, and so therefore once you introduce something like this, it's really difficult to reel back in unless you change it all together, or you kind of do a bit of a rework down the line. Now, I would imagine they would have done internal testing before introducing something like this and probably said, yeah, this should be fine. I mean, xdefiant itself is not, say, just Call of Duty. There are so many different elements to it with all of the factions, with all of the abilities, etc. Something like this probably should be considered more acceptable and more receptive to being allowed into a game such as this. And I think at the end of the day, as long as there's some kind of like fallback option, if it ends up being an issue, if it ends up actually being incredibly strong and powerful, you've got to then be say, okay, well, we've got this as a plan B. We can change it to this and it becomes something else. And it's no longer going to be the case of, requiring 2 headshots to kill. So
I think my like final point to summarize would be, I don't personally have a problem with snipers being a 2-shot headshot, provided there is some kind of skill gap to it. If it was more so like some kind of ability that you had to play around or whatever the case may be, it would perhaps make a little bit more sense. But the fact that it's a passive, you don't have to do anything if you're GSK, you've just got that innate ability to wear 2 headshots against a sniper. To me, that feels a little bit cheap, and I don't think it's really the best game design. So I wouldn't be too surprised if, at least against snipers, it does get an adjustment.
Yeah, quickly touching on the rest of the GSK faction. So you got the active defense system, which, I mean, essentially the ADS and its replication from Rainbow Six Siege, where it can catch a certain amount of projectiles. In this case, it's unlimited, but it's a small amount of time. Whereas in Siege, it's a little bit more different, sort of set charges as to how many it can catch, and then it goes away. The shockwire as well, bit of damage, good slow, larger in size. Ultimately, it is meant to be this kind of defensive specialist, which does mean it's most likely going to be mostly relevant depending on the mode in which you're playing. If you're playing like capture objectives, for example, I think any kind of like run around like free for all, is this something that's going to be as relevant? Maybe not, but that's also maybe where the ballistic helmet passive actually kind of gives it a bit of a helping hand in these more like free for all environments, the run and gun environment, outside of just kind of sitting on site and using your ADS, using your shockwire, etc. This allows you to maybe be a little bit more engaging with trying to take fights and, be a little bit more gung-ho running around corners and such, as is really the kind of nature of a game like xdefiant. So curious to see how that all shapes up once everyone can kind of get their hands on the GSK faction. But I'd say so far it's looking to be quite a strong addition. I think this is also a little off topic here, but like power creep is something, and I know it's only day 1, season 1, like, but it's always a thing, right? And a game like xdefiant, which essentially is almost like, a hero shooter to a degree, you've got to be a little bit careful with the way that you power creep eventually over time. Now, in this instance, you're going pretty hard, pretty early. What happens in 2 years' time when something like GSK ends up looking maybe a little bit lackluster because you've introduced all these other things, right? So I think that's definitely one thing that they've got to keep in the back of their mind as they're introducing these factions, as to the differentiating between the factions, how strong they are, all of those kind of things as well. So we'll see how its place settles, but I think it's looking pretty strong at the moment. Very quickly as well, guys, if you want to touch on maybe some of the balancing changes too that are coming with season 1.
Yeah, I mean, again, just quickly doubling down, GSK, I think all of those changes are good. There's been an over-reliance on barriers for defense, and the nade spam is insane. So all of those options defend against that really well, and the tac shield looks really interesting. I know a lot of people don't really like shields in arena shooters, but I'll hold my thoughts until we actually get our hands on it. As you mentioned, the patch notes actually also did come out. I'll link them down below for those that are interested. There are some balancing changes coming to the factions for Season 1. Most notably probably is the Intel suit, which has proven to be very, very powerful, especially on compact maps. Cooldowns going from 30 seconds up to 40. The barrier, as I kind of just mentioned, very powerful defensive tool, 30 to 40 seconds, and the health has also been reduced. The bubble ult as well from that class now takes damage to EMPs, which logically makes a little bit more sense and offers more counterplay opportunities. Spiderbot, everyone's been complaining about the Spiderbot because it's a bit of a troll. 25 seconds to 40 seconds, I think that's a positive change. And then the BioVita has actually seen a buff, 25 seconds down to 20. That was a very powerful tool in the beta, but it does feel like healers from the Libertad class have dropped off a little bit in the live build, and so that's probably to bring them all in line. I think all these balancing changes are good. The devs continue to say that they are receptive to feedback. They are looking at data, they are perusing through that, and are willing to make changes rather quickly instead of letting things get out of hand. And so they're sort of putting their money where their mouth is, and I think all of these changes make really good sense.
We'll move on a little bit and talk about the meta and more so Ubisoft's kind of perspective on it. And I mean, this is not necessarily just meant to be a full-blown rehash of what was revealed in the season 1 reveal, but I'm interested by kind of the wording here, which is the fact that they've essentially stated they're not going to sit back, wait till next season before they address anything. Now, this might be also somewhat related to, like, you know, the Ballistic Helmet passive, for example, where, or GSK in general, gets introduced to the environment, and if that shapes and changes and warps the environment to a liking that they're not to, you know, to not the liking of the consumer base, they're basically saying they'll address it as quickly as possible. Now, that's good, but also at the same time, we don't actually know what changes they would make or how they would make them, how quickly is quickly. And the other thing as well is sometimes you need to let it have some time, because, like, and this is the case, right? Like, if you go in and introduce GSK, and let's say it's strong, but it's strong because people don't know how to, like, figure it out, or it's a change they're not used to, and then Ubisoft come in and they change it, and it's like, and everyone's like, oh, great, they've nerfed it, it's not strong anymore. Now it's just dead in the water content, right? They haven't introduced anything. So if you go too quickly, that also has a negative effect, as much as, like, it's, I mean, I would say generally what they kind of go for is a bit of positive sentiment, that they're trying to say, we're not going to just let it sit there and be, like, super strong for super long time. But you got to allow the player base to actually understand new additions, how to counter it, how to work on it, how to, like, you know, navigate this new environment that they've been introduced to. And that's why sometimes a lot of other games typically wait until something like the next season, because then there's a far larger sample size, when you can sit there and say, okay, well, last season this dominated, let's change it up for this season. If you're just changing things within, like, 1 to 2 weeks, again, because we don't know how quickly it quickly is, then I don't know if that's the right approach. But I'm also somewhat still okay with not waiting until next season, because nothing sucks more than, let's say, a week or two into the season, something's incredibly broken, and you just know full well, like, oh, you know, like, nade spamming is, like, ridiculous, I just don't want to play, because nothing's going to be done about it until next season. So it's both good and bad. Don't take, I think, those kind of words and that kind of thought process about the meta as this, like, one catch-all, like, positive gain. It's got to be something that Ubisoft are very careful with how they tread with these changes that they would possibly make in a quick fashion.
I mean, it's a positive statement, but it certainly opens themselves up. If we find ourselves in 6 months in a meta that's shit and they elect not to change it quickly, I guarantee you people are going to go back to this reveal and say, you guys said this, you guys said this. As you mentioned, though, it is a really delicate balance between changing things too quickly, letting things settle. I think the game came out in, you know, quite a positive light, and nothing had to immediately change. And then we saw those adjustments at the end of the season. And so I anticipate we'll see more of that going forward, probably, again, in respect to some of the weapon balancing as well. And there's been a bit of a hot talking point. We're not going to see any weapon balancing heading into this season. And so that's probably something that's also in the background getting looked at. But overall, I think it's a positive, you know, statement that they're willing to be flexible, which is good. Hopefully, yeah, again, it continues to be a hot talking point, and it probably will be. The more factions get added, the more guns get added, the more maps get added, is the more variables and the more challenges that arise for the balancing team. So 100%. I wish them all the best.
Yeah, 100%. Very quickly, we'll touch on the weapons. I mean, last episode, we already went over the LVOA-C along with the L115 and the sort of shotgun. Essentially, the season reveal, just kind of giving some more in-depth knowledge regarding these new weapons and maybe what to expect. So essentially, the LV is just one of the faster time to kill ARs. It's kind of like an upgraded M4. It's got more recoil, less range, which to me, that just kind of sounds like close quarter combat, hold a tight angle, and you'll probably be more likely to get a kill by just, you know, spraying and praying. So again, these are the right way to balance guns, because it should be considered map dependent. That's what I hear when I hear, like, more recoil, less range. There are certain maps in which, depending on the lane, you might have a bit more of a medium to long range engagement typically happen, and therefore you might not grab the LV because of it. Or depending on the map, if it's a bit more, you know, closed indoor space, tighter angles, then the gun sounds amazing. But then you might also consider something like the sort of shotgun, which fills the gap apparently of the fact that there's no real super close lethal option. Now, does there need to be a super close lethal option? How lethal is lethal as well? I would imagine, like, if you're running around a corner and someone's sitting there with a sort of shotgun, you're just dead. That doesn't seem fun to me. Like, I feel like dying to that is going to be really annoying.
I don't know. I mean, the clips that they showed in the reveal, I don't think it's really going to be that good. I don't know. I don't think it's really that interesting of a point. I think that the AR and the sniper stood out to me as being far more interesting. AR has a bit of flexibility to it and could be a rival to some of the top performing guns at the moment, depending on how it actually performs inside of the live build. And then having a middle ground sniper is also really good because we have a more mobile option, a more damage inducing option. So we have a nice middle ground now as well. Again, it's not going to be enough to one shot someone from GSK, but
well, actually, wouldn't it? Oh, sorry, you're talking about the LR. I was thinking about the sort of shotgun, Will, right? Like you just shoot them in the body, right? Forget the head.
Oh, yeah, no. Yeah, I was talking about the sniper, 100%.
Yeah. All right, we'll move on to ranked mode, which I think is going to be the most appealing thing when it does come to Season 1, getting in and around ranked. Couple of really big talking points, but we'll quickly get through some of the lesser so ones before we do get down the list. So a couple of new modes when it comes to Occupy, predetermined zone rotation, so that should be interesting. You got zone control, escort, domination. So you get also a week warm up as well. So you're essentially playing unranked for a week, and then unranked becomes ranked. That's I don't hate that, but in a way, like when a season reveals, I want to just get straight into it. Like you've got the option to not play ranked if you don't want to play ranked. I'm actually going to disagree with this. Like, cause let's just begin. Like it's going to be a long enough season that like the first week is not going to be that harmful. The excitement when it comes to these kind of games, or realistically any kind of game that has like a season, is usually the first week. Like the release is the most exciting part, and you're telling me you can't play ranked for a week. Essentially.
Yeah, so I think in terms of the rule set for all the modes and the modes themselves is great. Also important to note that CTF and bomb or any other future modes will get tested in unranked before they make their way into ranked, so don't expect them to be added straight away. On the topic of the warm-up period, they're calling it, actually here for Season 1, Mark Rubin announced on Twitter that it's being reduced from 7 days down to 1, so there's going to be sort of like a 24-hour window to test things out.
I can mess with that a bit better.
No word on that if that's going to change in future. I'm a bit mixed when it comes to a warm-up period. I think in some regards, if you release a season that has a full stack of content, maybe there's new maps added to ranked and new factions, etc., you don't want people necessarily to inflate their rank by cheesing shit in the first few days. Maybe that could be seen as actually being skillful. I think that's probably up for debate. But in terms of the length of the period, I think that is probably far too long. Depending on what day of the week they release, I can kind of understand it. If it releases midweek, I think by the weekend it should probably then be unlocked and full proper ranked with ranks activated. A warm-up period, again, mixed opinions. I think it has its benefits and also its downside, but certainly 1 week feels like a very, very long period of time.
I wonder, and this is very speculative, and I'm putting tinfoil hat on, but is it also a way to try and get hidden MMR to do some shenanigans before ranked actually begins?
Well, I mean, they said that it's not impacting rank. I don't know if that implies that maybe MMR is getting shifted around, so maybe it's best to avoid the ranked playlist for the first 24 hours.
The other thing as well,
actually, it's a fair point.
Because there's cross-pollination when it comes to Rainbow Six Siege here, obviously, on the xdefiant show, but what would your reception be if it was implemented to Siege? Like, how would you feel? As someone that, I mean, that would be a new season comes out, you want to go grand ranked.
Well, that'd be such a culture shock because, I mean, that game's been out now for 9.5 years, and one of the big appealing points for ranked typically is the first couple days, people farm it like crazy because of the lack of cheaters. Now, I don't know if the cheater infestation is going to become that bad in xdefiant, but if you have a 1 week warm-up period, that's not just players warming up, that is cheaters and cheat makers warming up over that week. And if you're not on top of it, after a week, you are just going to have a game of ranked queue infested cheaters. Yep. So, I mean, that's not even a point that really came to mind when you brought it up then, but now I'm thinking about it. If you give the cheaters a 1 week head start into ranked, well, you can piss off ranked. It's not going to be fun after that period of time if it's not controlled. So, yeah, I don't know. I think this period's way too long. 24, 48 hours, sure, just to make sure that nothing's completely and utterly broken, especially when you're introducing new modes and stuff and new factions. But anything longer than that, I think people's interest is going to wane. And especially in such a competitive market, you have to be really careful.
So 7 ranks in total. Top 500 is Legends. And you've also got to be within 15 levels to queue. I'm assuming, is that to queue together? up
Correct,
until
yeah.
Diamond Plus, which is when they introduce a max party size of 2, which that is in itself is always just going to come with controversy. I think in any kind of game, in any kind of shooter like this, for example. So you can essentially 4-stack your way to Diamond Plus, and you are now forced then to split up. I don't know if I like this, only for a couple of reasons, and we probably end up spending some time here. But like I would imagine Diamond Plus is pretty deep into the system here. I mean, I haven't actually seen
So they haven't revealed distribution.
the distribution, but it sounds
I would
like
assume it's top 1% or less. It would be a small amount.
which means that you could, like, again, you know, you're on Discord and you're messaging people like, hey, come play ranked, etc. And you get like a stack together and you're just having fun, you're vibing out with your friends, and then suddenly you finish a game and you're like, oh, I've hit Diamond Plus, I can't now play with you all. That is incredibly limiting. And I don't really understand it, because for so long during ranked, you are allowing it, and then it's like, okay, no more. And like, I get they can kind of like, I guess it's aimed to try and counter things like boosting like bad players or something. Because like, what else is it really there for outside of that? I guess, you know, like, because you can always kind of include a stack v stack element when it comes to like matchmaking. Like if it's a 4-stack, you can always try and prioritize you're versing another 4-stack.
Yeah, which is in the reveal, it said they are doing that. So presumably in the ranks in which you can 4-stack, the matchmaking system is prioritizing putting stacks against stack. They mentioned that, you know, ping takes priority, I'm sure Q time as well, and so that can't always be achieved. And so I presume that, you know, at that higher rank where it is more difficult to matchmake potentially, that is another reason why they're adding it. I have never been a big fan of games forcing party sizes for queues, especially in games without a role queue. I think for like a League, even in Overwatch, it kind of makes a little bit more sense. But in a game like xdefiant, if you don't have role queues, it just, I don't know. The way I see ranked is it should be the most competitive environment inside of the game. And for me, having a full 4-stack calming, you know everyone, you know your playstyle, you've got some strats on maps, ripping that up to then having to grind to the top 500.
What does it do for esports?
I don't really like it. And I actually think that we may be in the minority here. I think a lot of people actually do prefer it. So if you have that opinion, let us know why. Personally, I don't really like it.
Well, like, no disrespect as well, but
I'm open to trying it.
Yeah, the interesting thing about it as well is it doesn't actually affect, I think, an area where it would actually be maybe somewhat considered more relevant, which is like the idea of like a stack stomping some noobs, for example, right? But at the same time, and this is why this is a very difficult thing to try and combat, but like if you try and introduce, say, this like max party size at the lower levels, then you're actually just taking away like the for funds, if you will, that are, you know, playing in your silvers and your golds. You certainly don't want to affect them. I also look at this as like what happens in terms of the esports environment when it comes to wanting to play as a team in a ranked environment. Like right now in Siege, you can you know, play your esports matches, and then all 5 of you can go and play ranked immediately afterwards. And I mean, maybe something like a Faceit could eventually fill the void of like actual high level rank, but I think it's very limiting that the internal ranked mode is not going to allow you to play with like your team, for example. So there's downsides and there's plus sides, and I'm not in the position to say like one is better than the other, but by all means, I can see arguments for both sides. That's the biggest thing here. I think this will be very controversial. I think this will be the kind of thing that with time will get tweaked. Like you'll see it get opened up to like, we're allowing 3, or, you know, and truthfully, I think it's also a case that if they had a higher player base, you would probably just say, here's a solo queue or a duo queue, and then here's like just a, you know, a full do what you want kind of queue.
I think if they had the player base, it should be open. If you 4-stack, you are then opening yourself up to longer queue times. You will only be placed against other 4-stacks. Now, that may run into other issues because, again, you are trying to create a fair playing field for everybody, trying to grind to the top 500. So that could also introduce other problems where, you know, like a solo queue match-made lobby is going to be playing out quite differently to like a 4v4 lobby, etc. I don't know. I think it's very much a thing where we sort of sit back and let it simmer and see how it feels.
the one good thing about this, and it is actually a good thing, and I agree with this, is that you can't have a situation where you go in as a solo and you're outnumbered. So there's nothing worse than a solo, let's say,
into a 3-stack.
Into a 3-stack, and you're just completely getting bullied by these people or whatever, or at minimum in this case, if you queue as a solo, Diamond Plus, it'll always be another solo +2 at minimum. That's just the minimum. Otherwise, it'll be you and 3 other solos. Now, what happens in a world in which you then queue into 2 duos, and it's like 4 solos? Is that like the same kind of thing? I don't know. Ultimately, these will always be, and this is why just introducing it just creates it. It just creates it. If you just don't introduce it, you just leave it. Let's see how things go. And that's why I'm a little bit surprised this is being introduced already. I don't know why season 1 isn't just like this kind of like free-for-all nature of like, let's see what happens. Let's see how this develops. And then if there are trends of like people 4-stacking to like get themselves to the high level, then in season 2, you can say we're going to combat that by doing this. And we're going to...
Again, Ubisoft's most successful and other competitive shooter title does not have any search restrictions at all anymore. It doesn't have any ranked queue restrictions. They removed that, and they also don't have any stack size requirements. So it's very different in that regard. Could it be for better or for worse? Only time is going to tell.
Yeah, and I think in the long run, the best solution that I can envision is kind of like what you said, where it's open, but if you choose to stack as 4, you get put into a separate queue that looks for other stacks of 4. That may take longer, but that's just the reality. Matchmaking prioritizes putting stacks against each other where possible is included in this as well. So I would imagine if you are stacking as a duo, you probably will play against other duos in the Diamond Plus environment. And if you are 4-stacking at the lower level, it'll prioritize you against those other 4-stacks. So clearly they've thought about this, and at the end of the day, it is easy. Whichever way you want to like begin with your testing, I guess this is the way they've gone about it. They'll make changes. I don't think they'll make like matchmaking changes. I know they said, going back to the meta, I think that's more pertaining to in-game. I think they would only make changes to this outside, like going into a season 2, and it'll be like, we hear your feedback. We're making these changes, yada, yada, yada. New modes will undergo evaluation before being added to ranked. That makes sense. The biggest thing here as well is also personal performance will have some impact on RP gain loss. Where have I heard that? Is it Valorant? Is Valorant the same, where it's like if you perform really well, you kind of like gain or lose a little bit?
Sounds
less or more?
Familiar. I could be wrong though.
Could be wrong.
I know. Again, it's different to Siege. Siege is a flat rate. That game, though, is far more difficult to track player impact than I think xDefiant will be. I'm presuming that a large part of that personal performance rating will derive from the match score, which generally, from my experience so far, has actually done a pretty good job in balancing out kills, assists, support, objective time. All of those metrics tend to be very well balanced, in my opinion. Maybe we'll see a bit more tweaking in terms of like objective point rates and stuff like that. I don't quite know, but I like that added bonus that maybe if you solo queue, right, you get a shit team, there's still an incentive to try and play well, try and play the objective to try and mitigate some of that RP loss. Even if you get put into a lobby at 2 a.m. and the matchmaking's rough and it's a match that you have like a 99% chance of losing, you still might be able to mitigate some of those losses. I think that's a good change. Again, we might have to see numbers tweaked. I'm not going to be shocked within the first like couple of weeks people are all over the place in terms of where their ranks are and like, I lost this much, I shouldn't have lost this much, or I gained this much, this was not enough, etc., etc. But those are all metrics that need to be tracked and tweaked. That's not going to take weeks. That's probably going to take months to get that data and then actually change it. But I think the overarching idea of having personal performance have an impact, I don't think it should be the biggest motivating factor. Obviously, at the end of the day, a win should be rewarded the most, or a loss, you should lose the most. But having, some incentive to play the team game is good and very welcomed.
Yeah, it's difficult to be too speculative because we don't know the actual numbers, as you kind of said, in terms of like how much of the impact will be made. Not to be negative Nancy again, but like I kind of look at it trying to be the devil's advocate in this case for the bad reasoning. But you imagine you're playing a game and you're losing, but there's a chance you could come back, right? Like we've all played these games before and you're in a losing position, you come back and you win. But if you're losing and someone in your team thinks the game is lost and they're like, well, I'm just going to like give up on this team mentality. It's ranked. It's like a capture mode or whatever. I'm just going to run around and like run and gun and try and get my KD up. that's going to further compound the likelihood that you'll actually lose. Like, there is going to be a world in which some people are going to be like, well, we can't win anyway, so I'll try and at least make myself look better so that the system doesn't take as much RP away from me. Do you buy into that? But I guess it's also dependent on how much, right, it changes.
Well, I think the system is, as I was sort of saying, pretty well balanced. So anyone that is going to throw their hands up and give up and go for kills is honestly pretty stupid unless the metrics get changed around. Again, we're operating under the assumption that this is derived from the score and not any single statistic over another. And the score value, which encompasses everything, tends to be pretty well balanced. I've seen plenty of games where someone is bottom to mid fragging, but they've been playing the objective the whole time on escort, get MVP. Like, that happens. So I think it's okay. Again, you do run into the problem of some things not being statistically tracked, right? Like, if you're applying really good pressure around a point, zoning it, you might not be getting a lot of kills or assists. You're not getting objective time because you're not directly on it. Well, chances are your stats aren't going to go towards that RP loss gain. That's where I think we can run into some problems, but I think the idea in theory is good. And assuming it doesn't have the biggest of influence, it's only like maybe say 10, 15, 20% of the calculation for your win-loss, then I think it's good.
Yep. All right, we'll get to Clubhouse and then into some of our closing thoughts here as Clubhouse makes its way in. Kind of what your thoughts and opinions being a Rainbow Six expert and the xdefiant expert. You've seen Club in one game, now into the second. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, so they showed a lot more footage of the map in the reveal, and Clubhouse, for those unaware from Siege, is an absolute staple map. It has been a fan favorite since the very beginning, very well-liked map, great aesthetic, cool setting, and they've used it as a groundwork here for xdefiant, but they have certainly changed what is required, right? So they've like pre-opened walls, there's easier clamber navigation to the second floor, they've opened up outside for like a third lane, there's even other unexplored areas of the map that have also been opened up for different occupy objectives, etc. So I think it's aesthetically it looks awesome, has, you know, some assets from Siege, the map overall looks like Clubhouse, if not a scuffed version of it. And yeah, I mean, hopefully in terms of gameplay, it actually plays out all right. That we don't know. We'll be able to make a podcast in a couple of weeks and see if the map is actually any good or not. But I think it looks great. And if that sets the precedent going forward for, you know, other maps from other games or hopefully some more Siege maps in future, then I think they did a really, really good job. They took inspiration from it without, you know, directly copying it. And it looks like a proper arena shooter map. You know, as I said, there are 2 floors. That's a really interesting dynamic. We do have some verticality on a couple of maps, but this one I think will probably play out a little bit differently. And so, yeah, I'm really eager to jump into it. I will say, I hope they, I don't think they will, but again, in Siege, for instance, when a new map comes out, you can normally just like 24/7 queue the map. I would kind of like that for this. Now they're dropping the maps, I believe, like 1 month apart across the season. It'd be nice to have a 24/7 playlist, like month 1, map 1, month 2, map 2, etc.
Wouldn't be surprised if it's like an increased chance. I know that in other games, like usually the first week, it's like you have an increased chance of like getting the new map.
I think they did that with Black Ops back in the day. Yeah. So maybe.
Yeah. I also think the added verticality, if done right, I don't see how it would be a bad thing. Like, but again, if it's done right, and then you can tweak it and drop it, and if it's done well and it's received well and it plays well, it opens up possibilities in the future for even far more.
We'll get an Oregon map next or something.
Like, the amount of maps that you would then be able to add in. I mean, like you could go to some pretty crazy levels if you're thinking really, really out of the box. But like, imagine Skyscraper for something like xdefiant, bit more enclosed, bit more verticality. So rather than like the more standard 3-lane horizontal map, what if you found a way of some kind of like a vertical map, for example? Again, very much thinking out of the box. Not anticipating. I hate Skyscraper, so I don't want it in xdefiant either. Let's get to some of the closing thoughts here at the closing of the reveal. And the biggest one here, straight off the top, is the prestige-like mode is in development. So probably when it comes to Call of Duty, prestiging is something that I would say, is claimed as a staple and has made its way into other games, mainly because of Call of Duty. I mean, I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure they just like kind of invented prestiging, or the idea of like doing everything again. It needs to be in a game like xdefiant. I'm okay with it not being in at the start, because I think the game itself doesn't need it at the start. There's so much to do, so much to learn, and so much other things going on that it shouldn't just come down to this almost like prestige race at the beginning of xDefiant. So I think letting people just play the game, enjoy the game, not worry about like prestige racing or whatever it may end up looking like, I actually think is a good thing. So I think the fact that it's in development is good, but also at the same time, the fact that it's not here at the very beginning of the game's lifespan is also probably not a bad thing either. And I want your thoughts on this one, but keyboard and mouse coming to console, again, I think is a great thing because it opens the door for that crossplay to just be completely viable and there's no issues at all.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think crossplay matchmaking is great for queue times, and if there are console players then on the same input, you can just naturally put them into PC lobbies. I don't know how many players on console are really going to want to play a game like this on keyboard and mouse. I don't know. I would assume it's a minority, but still a nice quality of life option for those players. Going back on the prestige point, I really don't care that much. They did announce some new like weapon mastery camos, which is really cool. So you can actually grind shit for free in this game. You don't have to spend like $30 on every bundle to get cool skins, and they actually looked really good. So that's a positive for me. I'm looking forward to grinding those. A couple more points that they closed on. Kill cams are being worked on, so it goes without saying they probably need to be added to the game, especially with ranked coming in. Depending on what the kill cam system looks like in a ranked mode, it helps in identifying cheaters, and hopefully down the line we get like a theater or a replay mode. I really hope that that was actually considered when they built the game, because it took Siege like forever on their old engine to implement it, and obviously it was a very tough technical challenge for them. And then on top of that, private matches are on the way. Again, another feature that really should have been in day one, so I'm not going to like kiss their boots and say, well done guys, you've added private matches to a game in 2024, great, good for you, but at least it's on the way. And the big talking point for me, or the word that was used that's a real positive for the likes of you and I in the industry, they mentioned esports very specifically, and even Yves, the CEO, in an interview the other week, also mentioned that they want xDefiant to be an esports powerhouse. So they're building it from the ground up with that in mind, and hopefully over the next couple of weeks or months, we can get private matches up and running, because with ranked officially out, queue sniping for tournaments or whatever is going to be pretty much unviable now. So we need that ASAP to build that community up.
Yeah, I mean, I think that whenever you're building an esport, there's so many different ways you can go about it. Now that we're into 2024, there's been years and years of examples of certain titles either doing it organically, the grassroots way, letting it naturally foster. You got other titles that essentially like, we're just going to throw money into it and try and make this a thing. So I'm very curious to see what Ubisoft's approach is going to be with xDefiant. I'm really hoping they kind of tread carefully and don't just go the approach of let's just throw money at it. I really hope it's going to be organic. This is where, again, goes back to the Diamond Plus queuing system, but I don't know if that then helps the organic growth of esports teams kind of being made together. If you can't queue as a team, you're not getting that initial ranked environment. So that's going to be something that I think is a concern for me, but who knows, then private matches can then just potentially overtake ranked. I really hope there's also good facilitation of being able to use things like Faceit as a third-party platform. That would be really, really good. The issue then is I don't know how you implement that for like console, and considering how big xDefiant is for console, that's going to be the biggest thing. I've kind of viewed this game as going to probably be far more of a pop-off when it comes to console esport than, say, PC esport. So, if again, no ranked queue as a team, therefore probably means no Faceit platform, which means I don't know how they're going to organically grow this. It's going to be very intriguing. I guess it's just going to be a case of, hey, we're going to put a tournament out. Here's the signups. 4 buddies make a group, and then off they go and they play. But then those 4 buddies can't play ranked together. Like...
Yeah, I don't know. I think that's probably the most interesting takeaway in terms of the squad restrictions, because
it also encourages smurfing, by the way. It also encourages smurfing.
Yeah, because then people are just going to want to smurf to 4-stack in the lower ranks, which is another problem in a free game, especially. So, no, totally agree. And
one good thing about esports would be the skins, because Ubisoft has done a tremendous job with the partnership skins when it comes to Siege. I think they're arguably the best esports skins. So
easily.
That'd be big for xDefiant.
Yeah. Again, we're going to have to wait more about esports. Hopefully by the end of the year, we've got private lobbies, and then I'm sure we'll see, third-party tournaments pop up and then go from there.
Yeah, I don't want to be too negative coming out of this. I think the season 1 reveal has been incredibly positive. I think there's a lot of really good takeaways, but I can't help but just be fixated on the restriction when it comes to ranked. I really hope we don't end up in a situation where the couple of months down the track, everyone's complaining about cheaters, they're complaining about smurfs, they can't play with their friends, all of these kind of things that could potentially be on the cards. Now, mind you, Diamond Plus may be, as you said, like top 1%. It may not affect the vast majority of the player base, but it is something to consider for the long-term health of the game. So I'm really hoping that it's for them going to be something that they've got fallback plans on. They can change potentially if it doesn't quite work out. Guys, I'll kind of get your final thoughts here on season 1. I know tomorrow you're going to be grinding the hell out of it. You're not working, but I am, so I'm sure you'll go to town on it.
Yeah. I mean, obviously, after we record this, it's pretty much going to be live, and then I'm keen to jump into the warm up, get accustomed to 4v4, because I didn't really play a lot of the trial run ranked. It's really just been 6v6 and like XP grinding. So yeah, eager to jump in and then reassess in another podcast in the next couple of weeks, and where we write, where things good, bad, whatever, reassess. Who
knows? They might even make some changes by then as well, depending on how quick they want to.
I mean, they continued to shadow drop things. I mean, they shadow dropped TDM, Search and Destroy as well. I think got expedited, and that's coming out in season 1 as well. So that's again another very exciting mode for a Siege player like myself. So yeah, a lot of good things to look forward to. Season 1 is promising. Still a lot of groundwork, foundational stuff that needs to come, like private lobbies, for instance. But gameplay, I think, is looking really, really exciting, and any switch up is going to be good in a game like this. And yeah, just eager to grind it out. Exciting week ahead. xDefiant Season 1. As always, thank you everyone for tuning in and watching here for the xDefiant Show. That's Season 3, Episode 3 in the books. Hopefully it's not that quick until Season 3. There's surely going to be some time, and hopefully everyone enjoys Season 1. We'll be back in a couple of weeks' time and kind of give a bit of a recap on where things are at. I'm hoping the next time we actually make an episode, we've kind of got maybe some changes to go over as well. As you said, a really good way to then I'll be top 500.
I'm sure you probably won't be.
No, probably not.
Alrighty. All right. We're going to end things here, though, but we'll hopefully see you in the next episode for the xDefiant Show.